Maya Khan lived in a small town where life moved slowly, and everyone knew everyone else. Her house was modest, with a little garden in front where flowers bloomed in all seasons. She had lived there all her life, and she liked it that way. The town was peaceful, with narrow streets and friendly neighbors. It was the kind of place where people stopped to chat, where children played freely, and where the rhythm of life was simple, unhurried, and predictable. Maya liked predictability because it gave her time to think and enjoy the little joys of life. Maya was not like most people her age. On the outside, she seemed ordinary. She dressed in simple clothes, often cotton dresses or plain shirts and trousers, and she never wore expensive jewelry. Her hair, always tied neatly, showed signs of silver threads, but she carried it with grace. Her eyes, however, were something special. They were bright, alert, and curious, always observing, always thinking. People noticed her kindness first, but those who looked closely could see the spark of intelligence that quietly lived behind her calm demeanor. She ran a small bookstore in town, a place she had inherited from her parents. The shop was cozy, with wooden shelves full of books of every kind: storybooks, novels, history books, science books, and even some old textbooks from decades ago. The smell of paper and ink filled the air, mixing with the faint aroma of coffee from the small counter in the corner. The store was more than a shop, it was a sanctuary for Maya. Here, she could spend hours among books, reading quietly, solving puzzles in the margins, and thinking about things most people ignored. Despite her love for reading, Maya had never pursued a formal career in academics or mathematics. She had attended college for a short time, but life had its own plans. Circumstances required her to help her family, and eventually, she took over the bookstore. It was a simple life, one that many would consider ordinary, even dull. But Maya never felt ordinary. She had always loved numbers, puzzles, and patterns. From a very young age, she had shown an unusual ability to understand complex ideas in her own way. While other children struggled with multiplication or fractions, Maya would find shortcuts in her head. She could imagine numbers dancing, rearranging themselves until the answer appeared naturally. Her neighbors often marveled at her quiet intelligence. When someone struggled with a problem or needed advice, they would come to Maya, expecting simple guidance, and she would provide solutions that were clever and precise. Yet, she never boasted. To Maya, knowledge was a private joy, not a way to gain attention or fame. She liked to keep her thoughts to herself, exploring ideas quietly, solving small problems, and enjoying the thrill of discovery. Her family loved her for her simplicity and her wisdom. Her niece, Sarah, would often visit her bookstore after school, and they would sit together reading books or solving puzzles. Maya encouraged Sarah to ask questions, to explore ideas without fear of failure, and to trust her own mind. In this way, Maya quietly nurtured curiosity and intelligence in others, passing on a love for learning without needing recognition. Life in the town was ordinary, but Maya's mind was extraordinary. She found beauty in patterns that others missed: a sequence of numbers, the symmetry of shapes, the logic hidden in everyday problems. She would spend hours working on puzzles from magazines or books she found in the store, challenging herself with questions that were far beyond her everyday life. For Maya, solving a difficult puzzle was like listening to music, pure joy without purpose except for the thrill of understanding. The town had its own rhythm, and Maya moved with it. Every morning, she would open the bookstore, arrange the books neatly, and greet her customers with a warm smile. People came from all around not just to buy books but to talk to her. They felt comforted by her presence. Some came with questions about math or puzzles, thinking she might provide a clever solution, and often, she did, without effort. She was patient, never rushing anyone, listening carefully, and explaining things in ways that made sense to everyone. Maya also enjoyed walking in the mornings. She would stroll through the streets, greeting neighbors, observing the changing colors of the sky, or watching children play. During these walks, she often thought about numbers, patterns, and puzzles. She carried invisible problems in her mind, solving them quietly while the world went about its normal business. People saw a simple woman walking slowly through the streets, but her mind was alive, calculating, imagining, and exploring. Her intelligence was never about showing off, it was about understanding, about connecting ideas that seemed unrelated, about seeing simplicity in complexity. She had a gift for finding solutions where others saw confusion. This was not just about numbers. It was about life itself. People often came to her with problems, some personal, some practical, some emotional, and she had a way of seeing clarity where they saw only mess. Her advice was simple, but it worked. People began to trust her not because she was famous, but because she understood, listened, and guided them quietly toward answers they could grasp. Even though she lived a quiet life, Maya had moments of wonder and joy that were entirely her own. She loved the mornings when the sun hit the bookstore's wooden shelves just right, casting long shadows and golden light over the books. She loved the smell of fresh paper and the quiet hum of life outside the window. She loved the little victories of solving a problem in her mind before writing it down, the satisfaction of connecting ideas and seeing patterns. These were her treasures, simple joys that required no applause. Yet, despite her contentment, Maya had always wondered about the world beyond her town. She read about great discoveries, about mathematicians solving problems that seemed impossible, about people recognized worldwide for their genius. She admired them silently, but she never imagined that she herself would one day step into such a world. To her, brilliance was not measured by fame or accolades. It was measured by understanding, by insight, and by the quiet thrill of solving a problem that had no immediate reward except knowledge itself. Maya's life seemed ordinary to outsiders, but in truth, it was extraordinary. She possessed a mind capable of remarkable feats, yet she lived simply, humbly, and with kindness. Her intelligence was hidden in plain sight, a treasure she herself may not have fully recognized. It was not arrogance or ambition that defined her, it was curiosity, patience, and a love for truth. On one ordinary morning, she received a visit that would change everything. Her niece Sarah had invited her to attend a mathematics conference in the city nearby. Maya had no interest in seeking recognition, she went simply because Sarah wanted her company. She did not know that this day, this visit, would lead to a moment that would astonish experts and redefine what people believed about intelligence and talent. As she prepared to leave her little bookstore, Maya arranged the books neatly, swept the floor, and looked around with satisfaction. She paused for a moment, holding a small notebook she often carried in her bag. It was filled with puzzles, sketches, and notes, private thoughts and small challenges she had set for herself. Little did she know that this simple habit of carrying her notebook, of quietly thinking through problems, would soon lead her to do something no one could have expected. Walking through the quiet streets toward the bus that would take her and Sarah to the city, Maya moved with calm determination. She smiled at neighbors, watched children play, and felt the morning sun on her face. Life was ordinary, but her mind was ready for something extraordinary. Somewhere inside her, she felt a quiet excitement, a whisper of intuition that something unusual might happen today. She didn't know what it was, and she didn't need to. She simply walked, as she always did, prepared to observe, to think, and to engage with whatever came her way. Maya Khan, the simple woman of a small town, was about to step into a world of brilliant minds, challenges, and astonishment. Her life had prepared her quietly for this moment, though she did not know it. Her love for numbers, her curiosity, her patience, and her quiet intelligence would soon shine in a way that no one, not even the experts, would see coming. The ordinary woman was about to achieve the extraordinary, and in doing so, she would teach the world a lesson about humility, genius, and the surprising places where talent can be found. The day of the mathematics conference had arrived, and Maya Khan found herself in a world very different from her quiet little town. The city was alive with energy, tall buildings reaching toward the sky, streets buzzing with cars and people, and the air filled with the sound of hurried footsteps and distant horns. Maya had never been in such a large city before, and even though she felt a little nervous, she also felt a quiet curiosity. She had always believed that learning could happen anywhere, and she was ready to observe and enjoy the new experience. Her niece, Sarah, was excited beyond words. She had been invited to attend the conference as part of a student group, and she could not wait to see the famous mathematicians in person. Maya walked beside her through the crowded streets, holding onto her bag that carried her notebook filled with puzzles, numbers, and sketches. It was an ordinary bag, but inside it were hours of quiet thinking, of ideas practiced and refined, though Maya never thought of them as extraordinary. She just liked solving problems. The conference hall was impressive. Huge glass doors opened into a spacious room filled with hundreds of people. Mathematicians, professors, and students from all over the world had gathered. The walls were lined with posters of famous mathematical achievements, and there were tables where people displayed papers, books, and laptops. The room hummed with conversation, punctuated by occasional laughter and the scratching of pens on paper. To Maya, it was overwhelming, yet fascinating. She quietly followed Sarah through the rows of chairs, noting the seriousness in the faces around her. Soon, the conference began. A panel of renowned mathematicians, men and women who had spent their lives solving some of the most difficult problems in the world, stepped onto the stage. The audience fell silent as the first speaker began to talk. He introduced a problem that had puzzled experts for decades. It was described as almost impossible, something that even the brightest minds had struggled to solve. The problem involved complex calculations, patterns hidden within numbers, and a solution that was elegant but difficult to reach. As the mathematicians explained the problem, Maya listened quietly, her mind working in the background. She did not think of herself as competing with these experts, nor did she feel intimidated. To her, it was just another puzzle, one that required observation, patience, and creativity. While the experts talked about theories and formulas, Maya focused on the essence of the problem, breaking it down in her mind step by step. She did not write anything yet, she simply observed, thinking and imagining different ways the numbers and patterns could interact. The audience murmured with doubt and excitement. Many whispered to each other, commenting on the complexity of the problem and how unlikely it was that anyone outside this room of professionals could solve it. Some even smiled condescendingly at the few students in the audience, assuming that brilliance belonged only to those in prestigious positions. Maya sat quietly, unnoticed, with her notebook resting on her lap. She did not feel discouraged by the whispers or the disbelief around her. To her, numbers and patterns were universal, not limited to titles, degrees, or reputation. The problem was then written on a large screen, clearly visible to everyone. It was intimidating, filled with symbols, formulas, and sequences that looked confusing to many. The experts began working immediately, scribbling on papers, calculating, debating with each other, and sometimes shaking their heads in frustration. Some even stood at the board, discussing approaches aloud, their voices tense with concentration. Everyone in the room was focused on solving the problem, yet no one had an answer that was complete and correct. Maya quietly opened her notebook. She liked to write things down when she could visualize a solution in her mind. She began sketching small notes, breaking the problem into pieces, drawing patterns, and connecting numbers in ways that made sense to her. She did not follow the methods the experts used, because she had never learned them formally. Instead, she relied on intuition, logic, and her own way of seeing connections. It was a method that had always worked for her in the past, a method no one else had taught her but that came naturally. As minutes passed, the tension in the room increased. Some mathematicians muttered to each other about the difficulty, some paced back and forth, and some leaned over their notes, frustrated. The audience waited, many imagining that the problem would go unsolved, confirming the experts' claim that it was almost impossible. Maya, meanwhile, continued quietly, her mind calm and focused. She was not thinking about recognition or fame, she was thinking only about the problem, observing it, understanding it, and following the path that her intuition suggested. Finally, after 47 seconds, she wrote down a complete solution. It was clean, elegant, and precise. She could hardly believe it herself, though it felt natural. Her hand rested on the paper for a moment as she looked around, wondering if anyone had noticed. Most people were still absorbed in their own calculations, unaware of what had just happened. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Could it really be correct? Could she really have solved what everyone else thought was impossible? Her niece Sarah noticed the movement and leaned over. "Aunt Maya, are you sure?" she whispered. Maya nodded quietly. She was not shouting or drawing attention. She had no desire to embarrass anyone or to compete, she had simply followed her mind where it led. Still, she realized that what she had done might be extraordinary. The idea of showing her solution to the experts was daunting, but she also felt a sense of calm courage. She took a deep breath and raised her hand, timidly, hoping that someone would notice. At first, the room did not respond. Then, a young mathematician glanced at her and said politely, "Excuse me, miss, do you have a solution?" Maya handed her notebook forward. The mathematician's eyes widened as he glanced at the neat writing and the clear steps. He looked at his colleagues and whispered, "Could this be?" The experts gathered around, examining the notebook. Their faces changed from polite curiosity to stunned disbelief. The calculations were correct, the logic flawless, and the approach was surprisingly simple compared to the complex methods they had been using. A murmur ran through the audience. Some gasped, some whispered to their neighbors, and some could not believe what they were seeing. The panel of mathematicians began to verify the solution carefully, checking each step. It took only a few moments for them to confirm that it was entirely correct. The impossible problem, which had baffled experts and filled the room with tension, was solved by a woman they had never seen before, someone they assumed could not compete in such a world. The reaction was immediate and powerful. Cameras flashed, journalists rushed forward, and the audience erupted into applause. Some mathematicians shook their heads in astonishment, trying to process how a simple observer from the audience had solved a problem that had stumped professionals for years. Maya herself felt a rush of emotions: surprise, disbelief, and a quiet joy. She had not sought fame, recognition, or competition, but now the world around her could not ignore what had happened. In the midst of the excitement, Maya remained humble. She explained her solution calmly, step by step, showing that it was the result of careful observation, intuition, and logical thinking rather than complex formal methods. The mathematicians listened, some nodding in respect, some still trying to understand how she had arrived at the solution so quickly. Her approach was different from anything they had seen, yet it worked perfectly. The conference organizers quickly realized that this moment would be remembered for years. They invited Maya to speak, to explain her method, and to share her thoughts. She agreed, not because she wanted recognition, but because she believed in the value of sharing knowledge. The audience, including experts who had initially doubted her, listened attentively, their respect growing with every word. They realized that brilliance could come from anywhere, even from a quiet woman in a small town with no formal academic training in advanced mathematics. By the end of the day, Maya Khan had not only solved an impossible problem but had also challenged the assumptions of the mathematical world. She showed that intelligence, creativity, and intuition were not limited to titles, degrees, or prestigious institutions. They could exist quietly in someone who lived a simple life, someone whose mind had been nurtured by curiosity and patience rather than competition and recognition. The story of the day spread quickly. Reporters wrote about the simple woman who solved a problem experts called impossible. Mathematicians shared their astonishment, and students marveled at her approach. Yet through it all, Maya remained herself humble, kind, and focused on understanding rather than fame. She returned to her notebook, to the quiet joy of solving problems for the pleasure of thinking, knowing that what mattered most was the journey of discovery, not the applause it might bring. That day marked a turning point. Maya had stepped into a world she had never sought, yet she had made an unforgettable mark. The impossible had been solved, and the simple woman from a small town had become the center of astonishment, admiration, and respect. But for Maya, it was simply another puzzle solved, another pattern understood, another quiet triumph of the mind. After the astonishing moment when Maya solved the impossible problem in just 47 seconds, the atmosphere in the conference hall was electric. People could hardly believe what they had witnessed. Some whispered in disbelief, while others clapped repeatedly, unable to contain their excitement. Cameras flashed, recording the historic moment, and journalists jotted notes furiously, knowing they were capturing a story that would travel across the world. Yet amidst the chaos, Maya remained calm, quietly observing, as if she were seeing the world from a slightly different angle than everyone else. The panel of experts gathered around her, still shaking their heads in disbelief. One of them, a tall man with silver hair who had spent decades solving some of the most complicated mathematical problems, leaned forward and spoke gently, "Miss Khan, your solution, it's brilliant. How did you arrive at it so quickly?" Maya smiled softly, feeling a mixture of humility and quiet pride. She had not expected anyone to notice her work in such a big, crowded room. She replied, "I just looked at it step by step, and I trusted my mind. I didn't follow the usual methods. I just followed the logic as it made sense to me." The experts exchanged glances, some nodding in approval, others still incredulous. They had studied numbers for years, spent countless hours in research, and yet here was a solution from someone they had never met before. It was elegant, correct, and simple, a combination they found difficult to reconcile with their understanding of the problem. The room, which had been tense moments earlier, was now buzzing with energy, admiration, and, for some, a touch of humility. News spread fast. Social media platforms were flooded with videos, pictures, and messages about the woman who solved the impossible problem. Headlines praised her brilliance, curiosity, and courage. People from around the world began to comment, amazed that someone without formal academic training could achieve what trained mathematicians could not. Many students shared the news with excitement, hoping that her story would inspire them to think differently, trust their instincts, and believe in the power of curiosity. Despite the sudden attention, Maya remained grounded. She knew that the problem itself was fascinating, but fame was not her goal. Her joy came from understanding, observing, and solving puzzles that challenged her mind. She felt a deep connection to the logic and beauty of numbers, and that connection was what had guided her to the solution. As she looked around, she saw not only admiration in people's eyes but also curiosity, the spark that she had always loved in learning. The conference organizers invited Maya to speak on the main stage, giving her an opportunity to explain her thought process. She walked slowly, carrying her notebook, feeling a mixture of nervousness and calm. As she faced the audience, she noticed the wide eyes of students, journalists, and mathematicians alike. There was silence, a pause before everyone leaned in to listen. Maya began to explain, step by step, how she had approached the problem. She showed that instead of following complex theories, she had broken the problem into small, understandable parts, observing patterns that others had overlooked. Her explanation was simple, clear, and inspiring. She used examples from daily life, like counting objects, noticing symmetry, and recognizing repetition. The audience was captivated. Even the most experienced mathematicians nodded in agreement, appreciating the elegance of her approach. Some whispered to each other, realizing that the simplicity of her method did not make it any less brilliant, it made it revolutionary. For years, they had believed that complexity equaled intelligence, but here was proof that creativity and observation could surpass even the most advanced theories. After her speech, a young student approached her with shining eyes. "I've always struggled with math," the student said, "but watching you solve this problem gives me hope. Maybe I can think differently too." Maya smiled warmly and replied, "Math is not about memorizing rules. It's about noticing, thinking, and enjoying the patterns. If you observe carefully, you can find answers in ways you never imagined. The student's face lit up with understanding, a spark of curiosity now alive in their heart, the same spark that had guided Maya all her life. Meanwhile, the panel of experts was still absorbing the impact. Some were inspired, others challenged, but all were respectful. One professor said quietly to his colleague, "She reminds me why we became mathematicians in the first place. It's about curiosity, not reputation." Another nodded, adding, "And she teaches us that the mind of a simple observer can sometimes see what experts cannot." The words were humbling. For decades, they had been trained to measure intelligence by degrees, titles, and achievements, but here was a living reminder that brilliance could exist outside the traditional paths. The story reached the media quickly. Television channels interviewed Maya, and newspapers featured her on the front page. Social media users shared clips of her solving the problem, celebrating her humility, and praising her intelligence. Some expressed disbelief that such talent could exist outside universities or research centers. Yet, for Maya, the attention was secondary. She cared about inspiring curiosity and showing that anyone, anywhere, could engage with ideas, think deeply, and solve problems. Amid the excitement, Maya reflected on her journey. She thought about her quiet days in her hometown, where she spent hours looking at numbers, patterns, and puzzles. No one had ever told her she was special, and she had never sought recognition. She had simply enjoyed thinking, observing, and solving problems that interested her. It was a simple life, but it had allowed her mind to flourish without pressure, without comparison, and without judgment. That freedom, she realized, was her true strength. Later, at a small gathering organized by the conference, Maya sat with a few young students who wanted to understand her approach better. She showed them how to break problems into small steps, how to look for patterns, and how to trust intuition when logic pointed the way. The students were engaged, asking questions, making sketches, and trying different methods. Maya encouraged them gently, emphasizing that mistakes were part of learning, that curiosity was the most valuable tool, and that even simple observation could reveal extraordinary solutions. During the conversation, one of the experts asked Maya, "Do you plan to study mathematics formally now? Perhaps pursue a career in research?" Maya shook her head softly, smiling. "I enjoy solving problems, but I don't seek fame or recognition. I just like to understand. That's enough for me." The expert nodded, realizing that her passion was pure and untainted by ambition. Her love for learning was her motivation, and it shone brighter than any title or degree ever could. As the day ended, the conference hall began to empty. People were still talking about the incredible solution, sharing stories with their friends, and reflecting on the lessons they had learned. Maya walked slowly beside her niece, Sarah, feeling a sense of calm satisfaction. She had entered a world of experts, faced a problem considered impossible, and emerged not only successful but also true to herself. She had inspired, amazed, and taught others, all while remaining humble and grounded. On the way back to their hotel, Sarah held Maya's hand tightly, still in awe. "Aunt Maya," she said, "you did something no one could even imagine. You're a genius." Maya laughed softly, shaking her head. "I'm not a genius," she replied. "I just look carefully, think carefully, and trust what I notice. That's all." Yet even as she said this, she realized that the world might never forget the lesson she had shared, that intelligence is not only measured by degrees or positions, but by the courage to observe, think, and trust the mind's natural ability to understand. The next morning, Maya woke up early, looking out at the city skyline. She thought about the conference, the problem, the applause, and the excitement. But her mind wandered back to her little notebook, filled with other puzzles waiting to be solved. She realized that life was full of challenges, some simple, some complex, and that curiosity was the key to navigating them. Solving the impossible problem had been remarkable, but the true reward was the joy of thinking, the freedom to explore, and the understanding that brilliance could come from anywhere, even a quiet woman in a small town. By the end of part 3, Maya's story had reached far beyond the conference hall. It was no longer just about solving a mathematical problem, it was about inspiring people to believe in themselves, to trust their intuition, and to see that intelligence and creativity were not limited by status, education, or reputation. For students, teachers, and mathematicians alike, she had become a symbol of curiosity, courage, and quiet brilliance. And for Maya, the journey had only just begun. There were more puzzles to explore, more patterns to notice, and more quiet victories waiting in the days to come. After the conference, Maya returned to her hometown, carrying not just the memory of the remarkable day but also the responsibility she now felt toward the world that had suddenly noticed her. She walked the familiar streets, where children played in small alleys, vendors called out cheerfully, and neighbors greeted each other with warm smiles. Everything seemed the same, yet everything felt different. People now looked at her differently, not with curiosity alone but with admiration, respect, and sometimes even awe. Maya smiled quietly, knowing that her life had changed in subtle but profound ways. News of her achievement had traveled far and wide. Television channels replayed clips of her solving the problem. Social media buzzed with comments praising her intelligence and humility. Emails and letters arrived from strangers all over the world, expressing their amazement, gratitude, and encouragement. Students wrote to tell her that she had inspired them to approach learning with curiosity rather than fear. Teachers asked for advice on how to help students think differently. Even experienced mathematicians reached out, some seeking to collaborate, others simply wishing to understand the way her mind worked. Maya opened each message carefully, feeling a mixture of surprise and warmth. She read about young students attempting problems she had solved, teachers designing lessons inspired by her methods, and ordinary people finding confidence to try things they had previously thought impossible. She realized that her simple act of observation and thinking had created ripples across the world, touching lives in ways she had never imagined. It was a strange and wonderful feeling, to be at the center of so much attention yet remain grounded in her own quiet world. One day, Maya was invited to a local school to speak to students. She accepted gladly, seeing it as an opportunity to encourage curiosity and self-confidence. As she entered the classroom, she noticed the wide-eyed expressions of the children, their curiosity tangible. They whispered among themselves, some excited, some nervous, as they prepared to meet the woman who had solved the impossible problem. Maya smiled, walking slowly to the front of the room. She did not see herself as different or superior, she saw herself as someone who loved thinking and wanted to share that joy. She began to speak, explaining how she approached problems not by memorizing rules, but by observing carefully, asking questions, and trusting her intuition. She encouraged the students to notice patterns in everyday life, the arrangement of books, the steps on a staircase, the rhythm of a song. She told them that the key to understanding was curiosity, patience, and the willingness to explore ideas without fear of making mistakes. The children listened intently, some scribbling notes, others raising their hands to ask questions. The room was alive with energy, filled with the spark of discovery that Maya had always cherished. After her talk, several students gathered around her, eager to show her their own ideas. Some had tried to solve mathematical puzzles in creative ways, inspired by Maya's example. Others shared drawings, experiments, and observations, proud to demonstrate their thinking. Maya encouraged them gently, offering advice and asking thoughtful questions. "Why did you try this method?" she would ask. "What did you notice that others might not?" The children's faces lit up with understanding, the same excitement she had felt when discovering patterns herself. She realized that teaching was not about giving answers but about inspiring others to ask questions. Meanwhile, in the wider world, Maya's story continued to grow. Universities and research institutions began inviting her to give lectures and workshops. Journalists wrote articles highlighting the power of curiosity over rote learning. People in different countries shared her story as an example that intelligence is not limited by age, background, or formal education. Some even called her a role model for thinking differently, for showing that anyone could challenge assumptions and find solutions that others deemed impossible. Maya found the attention humbling but also motivating. She knew that this was a chance to encourage a broader culture of learning and creativity. Despite the growing recognition, Maya remained grounded in her daily life. She continued her quiet routines, spending hours observing numbers, patterns, and small problems that fascinated her. She took walks in her neighborhood, enjoying the simplicity of life, yet always thinking, always noticing. For her, the joy was in the process, the discovery, and the understanding, not in the applause or recognition. And yet, she could not deny that the world had opened new doors for her, giving her a platform to share her love of learning with people who might never have been inspired otherwise. One afternoon, a television producer contacted Maya, proposing a documentary about her life and methods. They wanted to show the world how a simple woman from a small town had solved a problem that had puzzled experts. Maya hesitated at first, unsure if she wanted so much attention. But she eventually agreed, seeing it as another opportunity to encourage curiosity and learning. The documentary team arrived, filming her daily routines, her interactions with students, and her reflections on problem solving. Maya spoke candidly, sharing her thoughts on observation, intuition, and the joy of thinking deeply. She emphasized that intelligence was not only about academic achievements, but also about the courage to explore, to question, and to notice what others might overlook. The documentary aired to wide acclaim. People were inspired not only by her achievement but also by her humility, her dedication to learning, and her ability to communicate complex ideas in simple ways. Viewers wrote letters, sent emails, and posted messages expressing how Maya had changed their perspective on education and problem solving. Students felt encouraged to explore ideas freely, parents encouraged their children to observe and think, and teachers adopted her methods to foster creativity in the classroom. Maya realized that her influence extended far beyond mathematics. It was shaping minds, attitudes, and even communities. As time went on, Maya received invitations to speak in various countries, meet young scientists, and participate in forums promoting education and innovation. Each event was an opportunity to share her philosophy, that thinking is a gift, curiosity is a guide, and observation is a powerful tool. She emphasized that everyone could find solutions if they paid attention, trusted their instincts, and approached challenges with patience and creativity. Her message was simple yet profound: intelligence is not about knowing everything, it's about asking questions, noticing patterns, and daring to think differently. In her own quiet way, Maya also reflected on the deeper meaning of her journey. She thought about how society often equates intelligence with formal education, degrees, or titles, yet her story demonstrated that brilliance could exist outside traditional paths. She understood that many talented people never have the chance to show their skills, simply because they are overlooked. Her achievement, while remarkable, was also a reminder that curiosity and creativity could thrive anywhere if nurtured and encouraged. Back in her hometown, Maya continued to mentor students and engage with her community. She organized small workshops where children and adults could explore puzzles, patterns, and problems in a supportive environment. She encouraged questions, celebrated mistakes as learning opportunities, and fostered an atmosphere of exploration and joy. Over time, her local workshops became a source of inspiration for the community, demonstrating that learning could be exciting, inclusive, and empowering. People began to see the value of curiosity, patience, and observation not only in mathematics but in everyday life. Through all these experiences, Maya remained humble. She never claimed to be extraordinary. She continued to wake up early, observe the world around her, and solve puzzles simply because she loved thinking. And yet, her influence grew, touching lives, inspiring students, and challenging established norms. She became a symbol of what is possible when curiosity meets courage, when observation meets creativity, and when simplicity meets brilliance. By the end of this chapter in her life, Maya had accomplished far more than solving an impossible problem. She had shown the world that intelligence is not confined to classrooms, laboratories, or academic titles. It exists in anyone willing to think, observe, and explore. She had inspired a generation to trust their minds, to value curiosity, and to embrace the joy of learning. And in doing so, she proved that a simple woman from a small town could not only solve the impossible but also change the way people think about intelligence, learning, and the power of the human mind. Life had returned to a gentle rhythm for Maya, but the impact of her achievement continued to resonate far beyond her hometown. The world still talked about the woman who solved the impossible math problem in just 47 seconds. Yet for Maya, each day was about the quiet joy of thinking, noticing, and understanding. She woke up early, took walks along familiar paths, and carried her notebook wherever she went. Ideas, patterns, and questions filled her mind, just as they had before the world discovered her. Fame had come, but it had not changed her. It had only created opportunities to share her love of learning with others. Maya received letters and messages from children, students, and even adults who were inspired by her story. Many shared how they had begun to see problems differently, to notice patterns, and to trust their own ideas. Some wrote about challenges in school, work, or life, explaining how her story had given them courage to think creatively. Maya read each message carefully, feeling a mixture of surprise, humility, and joy. She realized that her simple way of approaching problems had encouraged countless others to find confidence in their own abilities. One morning, Maya was invited to a national conference on education and innovation. This time, it was not just mathematicians who wanted to meet her. Educators, psychologists, students, and policy makers were all eager to hear her speak. She stood at the podium, facing a large audience, and felt a calm sense of purpose. She began by sharing her personal story, explaining how her love for observation, curiosity, and quiet thinking had guided her from childhood to that unforgettable day at the conference. She spoke slowly and clearly, emphasizing that learning was about asking questions, noticing details, and trusting intuition. The audience listened with rapt attention. Some nodded, inspired by her humility and clarity. Others took notes, eager to incorporate her ideas into teaching and mentoring. Maya encouraged them to create environments where students could explore freely, without fear of mistakes or judgment. The world needs thinkers, she said, not just memorization machines. Curiosity, patience, and the courage to notice are the most important skills anyone can develop. If we nurture these qualities, we can solve problems we once thought were impossible. After the conference, Maya spent time with students who had attended her workshop. She showed them new ways to look at problems, breaking them into smaller parts, observing patterns, and experimenting with creative approaches. The students were curious and excited, asking questions and trying out their own ideas. Some struggled at first, but Maya encouraged them, explaining that mistakes were a natural part of learning. Every error is a clue, she told them, a hint that leads you closer to understanding. Slowly, the students began to grasp her method, discovering the joy of thinking and solving problems in ways they had never imagined. Word of Maya's approach continued to spread. Schools began adopting her ideas into their teaching methods, emphasizing observation, experimentation, and curiosity over memorization. Parents encouraged children to explore puzzles, notice patterns, and ask questions about the world around them. Teachers found that students became more confident, creative, and engaged. Maya's influence was shaping a culture of learning that valued thinking over rote knowledge, inspiring a new generation to approach challenges with courage and curiosity. Despite all this, Maya remained grounded. She continued to live simply, spending time with her family, reading, observing, and thinking. She taught her niece, Sarah, about the importance of curiosity and patience, and encouraged her friends and neighbors to find joy in small discoveries. Maya believed that true brilliance was not about awards, recognition, or public attention, it was about the freedom to explore ideas, to ask questions, and to find solutions with honesty and clarity. This belief guided her through each day, helping her remain humble and focused on what mattered most. One afternoon, while walking in the park, Maya noticed a group of children trying to solve a puzzle together. They looked frustrated, arguing over different methods. Maya approached quietly and asked them about their approach. Listening carefully, she suggested a small change in perspective, showing them how to break the puzzle into manageable parts and to notice details they had overlooked. Slowly, the children began to understand, their faces lighting up with excitement as they realized the solution. Maya smiled, quietly pleased, knowing that this moment simple, ordinary, yet powerful was the essence of learning. It was proof that curiosity and observation could unlock potential in anyone, anywhere. In the months that followed, Maya was invited to give talks internationally, write articles, and participate in educational projects. Each opportunity allowed her to share her philosophy, that intelligence is not limited by formal education, social status, or age. She emphasized that thinking deeply, observing carefully, and trusting one's mind were gifts available to everyone. Her story became a symbol of empowerment, inspiring students, teachers, and adults alike to embrace curiosity and courage in all areas of life. Yet, amid the recognition and attention, Maya's personal life remained simple and fulfilling. She spent quiet evenings with family, enjoyed walks in her neighborhood, and took time to reflect in her notebook. She continued solving puzzles, exploring patterns, and discovering new ways to approach problems. For her, this was the heart of life, the joy of thinking, the excitement of discovery, and the satisfaction of understanding. She knew that fame would fade, but the love of learning and curiosity would last forever. One evening, as she watched the sunset from her small balcony, Maya reflected on the journey she had taken. From the quiet days in her hometown to solving the impossible problem on a world stage, she realized that her life had always been guided by the same principle: observe, think, and trust your mind. She understood that her achievement was not just about mathematics, it was about inspiring people to believe in themselves, to value curiosity, and to embrace the joy of thinking. She felt grateful for the opportunity to share this lesson with the world. Soon, Maya was approached to mentor a new initiative aimed at nurturing young minds. Schools, organizations, and governments wanted to create programs that encouraged observation, experimentation, and creative problem-solving. Maya worked closely with educators, guiding them to design lessons that fostered curiosity, resilience, and independent thinking. She stressed that the goal was not to produce experts in mathematics alone, but to cultivate thoughtful, observant, and creative individuals who could approach challenges with confidence and clarity. Through her mentorship, Maya met countless students with unique talents, different ways of thinking, and untapped potential. She encouraged them to ask questions, notice patterns, and trust their instincts. She celebrated their successes, supported them through difficulties, and showed them that intelligence was a journey, not a destination. Each student she inspired became a testament to her philosophy, that curiosity, observation, and courage could unlock brilliance in ways that traditional methods often overlooked. Years later, Maya's story became a legend in educational circles, a story told to inspire curiosity, confidence, and creativity. Students learned about her approach, teachers incorporated her methods, and communities embraced the idea that learning could be joyful, empowering, and accessible to all. Her life had become a bridge between ordinary people and extraordinary ideas, proving that greatness could emerge from simplicity, observation, and dedication. Yet through all the recognition and achievement, Maya remained herself a quiet woman who loved to think, observe, and explore. She never sought fame, rewards, or titles. Her happiness came from understanding, discovering, and helping others find their own paths to learning. She continued to live simply, surrounded by family, friends, and students, carrying her notebook filled with puzzles, observations, and reflections. Her story was not just about solving an impossible problem, it was about inspiring generations to believe in themselves, embrace curiosity, and trust the power of their minds. In the end, Maya's life became a message to the world: brilliance is not limited to the formally educated or the highly trained. It exists in anyone who observes, thinks, and dares to trust their mind. Curiosity is a gift, and learning is a journey open to all. Maya had shown that a simple woman, armed with patience, observation, and courage, could achieve the extraordinary. And in doing so, she had changed the way the world saw intelligence, learning, and the beauty of human potential. Her story, though extraordinary, was ultimately simple. It reminded people everywhere that thinking deeply, observing carefully, and approaching challenges with curiosity and courage could lead to remarkable discoveries. Maya's quiet brilliance became a beacon, showing that the power of the human mind is limitless when nurtured by curiosity, trust, and the joy of learning. And as she continued her life, solving puzzles, mentoring students, and exploring ideas, she knew that the true reward was not fame or recognition, but the opportunity to inspire, teach, and awaken the spark of curiosity in others.